Assalamu alaikum. I'm Joshua Salaam, and welcome to another episode of Deen Talk. Do you think that marrying outside of one's religion waters down their faith? Or do you think that it's a sign that religions are becoming more mainstream? Well, according to a report released by the National Study of Youth and Religion, did you get all that down? Less than 25% of the respondents, the people who replied, they were aged between 18 and 23. They think that it's, important to marry someone of the same faith. They don't think it's that important. In other words, almost 75% of the young people that were questioned feel that it's not a big deal to marry someone outside of their faith. Well, are we seeing a crisis in the making? What do you think? First and second generation Muslims are educated and excelling in their respective careers, but they are struggling to get married. Why is that? And they're presented with a number of challenges. What are the implications of interfaith marriages? That's the topic of today's show. And we have some amazing, terrific guests in the studio. I'm going to tell you who they are soon. So stay tuned for all of that and more right here on Deen Talk. When we come back, don't change the channel, don't push the dial or whatever that futuristic stuff is. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to Deen Talk. I'm Joshua Salaam, and I'm here with four beautiful, wonderful guests. I want to introduce them to you. Now, I know we gave some quotes about a study that was done, but we don't know how long ago the study was done. We don't know how many Muslims were in the study, and so our target audience is Muslims, so we did our own study, all right? And the numbers were a lot different. We're going to talk about that in this episode. But first, let's meet the guests. We have Brother Asad, who's the CEO of a new organization. I don't even know, it's not that new, but it's called Beyond Chai. You got to check it out. Go there, learn all about it. If you haven't gotten married, you might want to check it out a little bit more. Okay? We have Brother Zakaria, who established the Community Impact Fund. It's a beautiful organization. He's going to tell you more about it. Brother Zakaria. We have Sister Tabassum, who was helping me before the show actually get through some difficult issues. She's a therapist, and she's been doing it for 20 years with all that experience. She's bringing that to the show. And Sister Arifi, yes, she is the marketing consultant for Deen TV itself, and she's the one that kind of helped us put the survey together, so she's going to introduce all these things for us. We have all these guests, and I want to welcome everyone to Deen TV. How's everybody doing?
Thank you.
Yeah? You guys feel okay?
Yeah.
I know we had some icebreakers before the show, but they didn't see that, so we're going to jump into it. I want to ask you guys a question. What is the influence of faith on a person and on a relationship? How much is it going to influence a person? Anybody want to jump in? Let's start with you. You've probably seen it in some of your counseling with people. Do you find that faith helps a marriage more, or does the marriage influence the faith?
A little bit of both. I think the faith of any kind helps ground a person.
What do you mean by that? Helps ground a person?
Give them like a blueprint in life to work with, gives them some structure, gives them some organization, gives them some things to really kind of go to in times of need, in times of joy. It's kind of like a place to pull from. To kind of express yourself and find your place in the world.
Okay. So you believe faith grounds you, and you wouldn't necessarily say that faith has more influence over a marriage or marriage has more influence over faith.
I think it can. It depends on how you carry your faith with you. A lot of people carry their faith into their everyday lives. A lot of people have faith to fall back on times of need, on times of joy, on times of sadness. But if people who carry their faith with them, then of course it depends on how much your faith is part of your identity, because you take your identity into any relationship.
So there aren't really any absolutes. But what about you, Mr. BeyondChai.com? See, that's how it happened in the real commercial. BeyondChai.com. So what would you say about what you're seeing about how much, as people are typing in their preferences and their profiles, what are you seeing? How much is their faith influencing what they're putting onto the screen?
I think majority of what we've seen is that, the clients that we see, they want to stick within their faith. So when they're looking to get married, in this case, Islam plays a pivotal role in how they dictate whether it's the marriage life, whether it's dealing with the community, because all those things are centered around, as Sister Tabassum was mentioning, the identity. So without the identity, you really don't have anything to rely on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think it's important to have those things and set the foundation right.
How do you feel?
Well,
But don't give us too much into the survey yet. I know that you were the brains behind that. But just on this, because I want to save that for the second segment.
Okay.
Just open that up completely. But what do you have on what we're at right now?
well, I mean,
Because you have an
do you want me
interesting
to-
story.
Well, I mean, I was raised in an interfaith household, and definitely my own marriage, we are both Muslim and we're both practicing. And it's wonderful to have someone who wakes up at Fajr with me and someone who will pray Isha with me before we go to bed. And it's nice to have those little rituals of Islam throughout the day that I can actually share with my partner. And I know my parents, my mother was Christian for the first 23 years of my life. And my
Say that
father-
again? Say that again.
My mother was Christian until I turned 23.
Wow.
Yeah, and my father was Muslim and is a lay imam, actually. And my mother's parents are actually both Presbyterian ministers. So we had very, very different faiths in my house growing up. And I know my parents missed out on having that daily kind of ritual interaction that my husband and I have.
What's that like on the ground, right? Because I'm going to speak for the rest of us. We maybe didn't grow up with that, right? So you're a guest. We brought you on the show. You have that background of growing up in an interfaith household. On the ground, like like you said, when you wake up in the morning, when you did have two parents of different faiths, how did it affect you? What was it difficult? What was going on?
It was difficult when I didn't realize my mother was Christian until I was 7, because my parents had made the decision to raise us as Muslims under the condition that my father would be a perfect Muslim, so like literally no pressure at all.
Right,
Yeah. So, he taught us to pray and taught us that God is love and all of that stuff that was like, on a childhood level. And then when I was 7, I kind of realized that my mother wasn't practicing. And I realized, I put it all together that her family was such a religious Christian family. I was like, wait a minute. Oh my God, my mother's not Muslim. What does this mean? And I had read, and because my dad used to teach me a lot about Islam, that had basically said that if people know about Islam but still don't embrace it, then they're basically damned. And so at 7, I remember having like an existential crisis of, oh my God, what's gonna happen to my mommy? And luckily, alhamdulillah, it's all worked out.
It worked out.
It worked out, but I mean, I don't know what happened, behind the scenes. I just know, like, as a child, it was more like, but mommy, I must save you.
Now you just touched on a point, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit. That is so deep, because you might be having it with your mother, but there's so many Muslims who are coming to Islam from different faiths who are having that same issue with their spouse, same issue with their mom or their father, same issue with other family members. So that this isn't a scholarly program. We're going to come up with all the fiqh issues, but we're going to talk about it, and that's what we're here for. Now, Brother Zakaria, before you chime in, I want you to tell a little bit more about what the Community Impact Organization does, and then chime in with the discussion.
Absolutely. So the Community Impact Fund really was, I think, the real impetus behind launching this nonprofit grant-making organization was the lack of grant sources for nonprofits to do capacity development, capacity building, and for there to be capital to fund and implement innovative solutions to perennial problems that impact not just the Muslim American society, but just the larger community, right? So having a grant-making organization that is able to identify specific target areas in 3 to 5 year sprints that we want to move the needle on, and really just putting not just capital, but bringing in technical assistance, right? Bringing in folks that can really help move the needle on those target areas, and be able to pilot programs and say, hey, does that work or not? And then be able to report on what we're learning, right? And be able to share that with everyone. So that's our vision. We're going to be having our inaugural grant cycle this quarter, inshallah, if all goes well. And we hope to really kind of be the catalyst for innovative solutions and ideas that are addressing problems that are that are du jour, that are important, but they just had the same old things thrown at them.
So innovative solutions to problems. Now, do you from your perspective view this as a problem? Do you view this as something that needs a solution? Is this something that you would encourage people to put money to address the social pressures of interfaith marriages, or what do you think?
What I think is that there needs to be more platforms and an active role that existing institutions need to adopt in discussing these sorts of topics out in the open to an audience.
Like this platform.
Absolutely, like this, and these conversations need to happen more, right? So hopefully, folks are watching this and taking note, right, and saying, "Hey, we should have these," and this needs to happen. It's great that there's a great viewership here, but this needs to happen on a community level, right, where you're really engaging people and utilizing folks that have credibility within the community, that knows all the kind of nuances of the community and the youth, and could be not just necessarily youth, but other age groups as well. And being able to just address those topics, understand, just listen, not just talk to the people, but also listen. And that's one of the things that that we want to be able to do as well, is to actually have listening sessions around the country as an organization, so we're understanding and really kind of incorporating what we're hearing into our grants, right? So we're not just saying, hey, this is your problem. We're not telling them. They're telling us, right?
Now, I think what's important, just if I may, I think what's important is that for us to step back and ask, why are there interfaith marriages, right? I mean, I think we're discussing, the need for someone to leave their faith and marry someone outside of their faith. I think the challenge is, if you look historically speaking, one of the professors from the universities, Brandeis University, he said, Muslims are becoming the Jews. And what he means by that is, when Jews immigrated to USA, initially they focused on marrying within the Judaism, but then slowly, as they expanded, moved on with their lives, they started marrying outside of Judaism, right? So for us, we're also feeling similar dilemma, because Muslims are spread across USA, and there's a limited population where they can tap into to get married, right? So now Muslims, they get up, they go to school, they go to work, and they're surrounded by non-Muslims, right? Surrounded by people who are Christian or Jews, right? So now, because there's not, as Zakaria was saying, because there's not a platform, because this is not a center focus for many organizations and massages, there isn't an avenue and a platform where Muslims can get to know each other, right? And because of that, we're starting to see more people considering the options of marrying someone outside of faith.
And I got some stories, I'm going to save it for the next segment, that will kind of open that up more. And if you guys were listening very closely, the theme of, when Arifi was telling us about raising children, we had edited in, the little sounds of children in the background. So if you rewind, you might hear that. Maybe we'll give you some incentive if you can find where that was in the Deen TV video. But what I want to ask you before the break is, on Arifi's comment about, as a child, what she was going through, and as he's brought it up, why are people, I'm sorry, not he, Asad, why are people marrying outside of the faith? As a therapist, do you see this as really serious social issues that are pressing on Muslims that they need to come and talk to somebody about?
Definitely. I see a lot of couples coming later on in life, and it's interesting that you talk about interfaith marriages. It happens a lot in interfaith marriages, but it also happens a lot in same-faith marriages, where the strength of the iman and the practicing of the spouses are so much different.
And somebody could become more religious in the middle of the marriage and like, hey, I didn't sign up for that.
Exactly. Or someone could totally fall out of their practice. But I do see the impact on the children. And I've heard from a lot of people who have had interfaith marriages, once they had children and once they had to address the concept of raising them, and they never really considered the impact that it would have on their children. I've had a couple of people who said, I never thought of this. Had I thought of this, I would have made a very different decision way back when. So it has grave consequences, as does parenting in general, but it just adds a couple of different layers. So you have to be a little bit more conscious and a little bit more intentional and a little bit more proactive in your parenting than probably the average parent.
Arifi, before the break, we have 1 minute left,
Right.
okay? But I want to just give the listeners a little bit more about what happened after that moment when you were a child. You know, you say you went through this moment, and then you just said, and then it all worked out. But what happened like immediately after that moment when you're like, oh my God, what about my mother? What's going to happen? In the days and weeks and months after that, what was it like?
Well, I talked to my dad, who was a Muslim, is a Muslim, sorry, and he almost cried.
By seeing what you were going through?
And I think it was very difficult for him as well, because he was a practicing Muslim and firmly believed that like he wanted to have his wife with him in heaven, and was also worried for her. And so it was sort of a difficult moment that my dad and I shared. And sort of after that, we had a long talk about how basically, yes, this is her faith. Yes, this is different. But
You
we
and your
need to
father
respect
created
this.
your own platform for you guys to discuss.
Exactly.
Right? So as we have platforms, here's a young child that goes to her father, and basically you created a platform, and you had this conversation.
And he was open with me, which I deeply appreciate. He allowed me to kind of voice my concerns, and he responded to me like, didn't talk down. I mean, he talked to me on my level, but, acknowledged the concerns, addressed them at a level that I could understand. And I think that was incredibly important, that he actually was like, okay, we're going to be on the same page about this, and I'm going to acknowledge your feelings and kind of help you work through this a little bit.
And that ends our first segment, and I'm glad that we ended with that even as a young person, you have to be able to go to the right person and create this atmosphere to talk, because all of this that's happening today on Deen Talk is about conversation and about building platforms to discuss this issue. So we're trying to do that here. We're going to be right back and talk more about interfaith marriages. Be right back.